2022 regular session of Findlay City Council. We will start this evening with a roll call.
Mr. Ballman?
Here.
Mr. Greeno? Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer? Here. Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
Mr. Weisner?
Here.
And Mr. Wobser.
Present.
Mr. Greeno called me last night and informed me that he would not be here this evening due to illness. I will entertain a motion to excuse Mr. Ballman. So moved. Second, Mr. Slough. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. He is excused. Please stand for a pledge of allegiance, followed by a moment of silence in support of the citizens of Ukraine with the hope of a peaceful conclusion. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will accept a motion to accept the previous public hearing minutes and city council minutes. Mr. Slough.
I'd move to approve the minutes of the last regular session of council.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. They are accepted. We have no add-ons or replacements or removals from tonight's agenda. We have no proclamations. We do have a retirement resolution.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to read resolution number 009-2022, a resolution commending Thomas DeMuth for the excellence of his service to the city of Findlay, Ohio. Whereas Tom DeMuth, who served the city of Findlay, Ohio for 33 years as a dedicated, loyal employee, retired effective February 28, 2022. Tom began his career with the City of Findlay Traffic Lights Department as a traffic signal electrician 1 on September 25, 1989. He was promoted to Traffic Lights Electrical 2 on September 25, 1994, before being promoted to the position of Traffic Light and Maintenance Electrician 3 on January 25, 1998, with the job classification title changed to Traffic Signal Electrician 3 on October 21, 2001. He was then promoted to Traffic Signal Supervisor on April 6, 2008, with a job classification title changed to Traffic Lights/Signal Supervisor on January 5, 2014, a position he held until his retirement. And whereas Tom completed his Work Zone Traffic Controller training on April 14, 1992, his Hazard Communication training on August 31, 1994, and his Ohio Ethics Commission course on October 31, 2018. And whereas Tom was recognized via resolution number 039-2012 for his assistance during and after a severe windstorm occurring on June 29, 2012. And whereas Tom served in the United States Air Force from April 1984 until March 1988 in the secure communication maintenance and repair field. And whereas, during his 33 years of service to the city of Findlay, Ohio, Tom has performed as an outstanding public servant in a loyal and dedicated manner to the citizens of the city of Findlay, Ohio, through his responsibilities within the City of Findlay Traffic Lights Department. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Council of the City of Findlay, State of Ohio, Section 1, that said, Tom DeMuth be and is hereby commended for his long and loyal services to his city, and that this council extends its best wishes to him upon his retirement from the city of Findlay, Ohio. Section 2, this resolution shall take effect and be in full force and form after the earliest period provided by law. Please join me in congratulating Tom on his retirement. I would like to just briefly make remarks, and then, Mr. President, you can open it before we give him a small gift. Obviously, Tom has a very important position previously with the city. He also was a lot of fun to pester early in the morning when I would be driving places and notice issues with lights. But also a great team player. It was a pleasure to work with. He will certainly be missed, but he has made a deal that he'll bring me honey periodically still. So I'll allow the retirement. I accepted the resignation, even if not so happy about it. But Tom also said that he did not want to make remarks, so we won't require him to. That is his retirement gift.
Does he understand if he doesn't, his wife can?
I think that was part of their bargain as well. She didn't get to make any remarks.
I will entertain a motion to accept the resolution. Mr. Russell. So moved. Second, Mr. Hellman. Any further discussion? Mr. Russell.
Tom, I gotta say, every time I sat at Baldwin in Maine and I looked at that light, I knew it was gonna change quickly because you were on the job. And if it wasn't changing quickly, I knew it was gonna change soon enough because you were on the job. But quite seriously, just driving, after becoming on city council and understanding what you did and talking with Schmelzer and just seeing how our lights operate and then going to other communities, what you do is magic, and I so much appreciate it, and I just don't hear people complaining about lights and this and that, and it's because of your efforts, and quite honestly, for a lot of folks, that's what they know about their city government, whether their lights are turning or not, and so I really appreciate all that you've done and the expertise that you've put into what you do, and I just think we're just top notch, and it's a credit to you. So thank you and best of luck in retirement.
Mr. Wobser.
Tom, I echo Grant's comments, but at the same time, I'll say this: there are very few people that we've ever heard have come back and complained about traffic lights. And going to other cities, that is one of the first things you notice is lights that are screwed up and don't work well. And we never hear about that here. And I think it's one of the most visible things, besides the water turning on every morning and the toilets flushing, that you can go down Main Street, and if you do it right at the appropriate speed, you can go from one end of this town to the other in a very controlled and not have to stop at any lights, which is amazing. And I will say this last thing, as over the last, since I moved back to town 2002, and would be driving around and would see your truck and you tearing apart a box somewhere right on an intersection, I was like, well, this must have been a mess in the first place, so Tom's there. But I always felt good. It's going to come out better by the end of the day because Tom's there to fix it. And always a lot of confidence in all you've done. So I appreciate your years of service, appreciate your years of service in the Air Force, and what you've done for this community for quite some time. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your retirement to the fullest.
Any other comments? Just a quick one. I can imagine in 33 years, the technology that you've ran into from what you discovered when you first started here and what you're leaving us has to be dramatic. If as any guitar player will tell you, a tubed amp is not a bad thing, but I gotta think tubes in a traffic light box is not good. So, any other comments or questions? Congratulations, and do you have any final comments, Mayor? We'll just have him come up for a photo. Okay, thank you. We'll wait till you give me this. Until he's officially retired.
He's not officially retired until we vote.
Great.
No, that's just the resolution.
Do you want me to go out? Do you want me to go and tell him out there? I sent a text, forwarded the text to
Why
Brett.
don't you do it? Can you real quick while we're doing this? I'm sure it'll be a majority. Okay.
Thank you. And the traffic signal department is in very good hands.
That's good.
They are in very good hands.
Tiffin Avenue will flow.
Somewhat. Sometimes.
Maybe you put him on the spot.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the resolution, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Sorry. Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough? Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Weisner. Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted, and now you can go home. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no petitions this evening, no oral communications, no written communications, reports of municipal officers and departments.
Findlay Fire Departmental Activities Report for February 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for February 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Police Departmental Activities Report for February 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Findlay Municipal Court Activities Report for February 2022.
Questions or comments? Report to be filed.
City Planning Commission Agenda for March 10th, 2022, as well as the minutes of February 10th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Agenda and minutes to be filed.
Summary Financial Reports for February 28th, 2022.
Questions or comments? Mr. Stashek.
Thank you, Council President Harrington. I want to draw your attention to the snapshot page, third page of the report, to your severance payout reserve fund. At your last meeting, I thanked you, told you we'd be updating this for moving money set aside for retirements that we already know we have costs that are incurred. What has changed is with the increase in the wages for 2022, as well as recalculating based on that and the amounts that will be due with the folks who did not retire that could have, our obligation for 2022 has increased to about $2,055,000. So we originally, in your appropriation, appropriated an amount which was good through 2023, but with the increases, we've now appropriated an amount that's only good through 2022, which is a good thing. That's not a negative thing. So I'm giving you a positive aspect of it. However, as at present, our obligation for 2023, the second half of your budget cycle, would be an additional $332,000. So we are in great shape there. Although it reflects as yellow, that's just because it's not 100% covered, but I'm really pleased with that. Second thing I want to mention is with the ARPA dollars, we received notice that in addition to the $2.1 million tranches, we were going to get an additional amount of about $8,600 added to those funds. So that was let us know from the federal government. And also, in reviewing that, and I've informed the mayor and the service director and appropriations chair Webster that through the review, I do not believe that the best course of action is going to be to appropriate the money to projects as we originally thought in the final ruling, and we have some additional review to complete to determine how exactly we would do it and where exactly we would put the funds. We believe we're going to bring all that money in or recommend it all comes in as a revenue replacement. There's a $10 million exemption that is allowed for that. We've got a total of just over $4.3 million. So I think it's going to be a good thing. I don't have all the details for you, but it's going to be very similar. We're going to handle it very similar to how we did with the CARES Act. So those monies will come in, and I'll let you know what funds and where, and have a full recommendation when we request an appropriations meeting from Mr. Wobser. Third thing that I want to share with you is if you go to the next section of the report, and I share this primarily for our new members, there's an open projects report. The open projects report, the purpose of that is to tell you how much money for each project out there you've appropriated. It's broken down by fund. So you have general fund on the first page. If you turn SCM&R, that's your streets. Then we have the ARPA dollars there, as you can see, airport, sewer, water. I want to direct your attention to the water, to the water meter system replacement. It's a great time to illustrate this. If you look at that, your total appropriation for water meter systems replacement was $1.267, so $1,267,000. The what you want to look at when you're reviewing this report for your benefit is how much money is available, is unencumbered or unspent. So if you look at the currently available to spend, it's listed as 0 because it's all encumbered in a purchase order for $1.267 million. So I cannot tell you, sorry about that. I cannot tell you how much of that 1.2 million has been totally spent. I can tell you in the column before that only $154 has been expensed, in other words, billed to us and paid as of the generation of this report for the end of the last month. So the difference between the $154 and the 1.2 million, I don't have the ability to account for that because of what the departments may or may not have actually been billed or not yet PO'd in between. And the reason I mention that now is so you'll see the reason they're making the request. I would let them explain, but later on you're going to request $412,500 from water and sewer. That money will then flow into that project, and until it's encumbered by a PO, show as unspent money, so an additional $824,000. So I share that with you for your benefit, so that when you're looking in the future and money is requested, you can quickly look at this project's report, know how much money you've spent on a project, how much money has been encumbered in a PO or actually been paid out, expensed out, and how much money is still available to spend. And I would always, always be available to entertain questions in the interim with regard to that for any individual. If before a meeting you desire a call, and every now and then I do get council members that call our office and ask that information. So that was a lot, but if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Any other
Thanks, Jim.
questions or comments? Report to be filed.
Letter from Director of Law Don Rasmussen regarding amendment to salary ordinance number 2022-11.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding water meter system replacement, project number 357-83300.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
A letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding Findlay Airport North Apron Rehab, project number 352-10500.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding State and Markle Street Reconstruction OPWC, project number 328-03300.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
Jeremy, and I suspect that I'm looking at this the wrong way. When I add up the numbers that we're moving over to this project, it adds up to $520,000. But yet the bids were a maximum of $459,000.
Yeah, so with the OPWC grant money, with our agreement, it's $300,000, a maximum $300,000, and working with the auditor's office, they want us to appropriate that whole money into the project, because you never know if it goes up or down or as you're going through the life of the project. So we appropriate the $300,000 within, and then as we go back and say it comes back and we know we're not going to be spending that $300,000, we'll have to go back through and say this much money goes to this fund, this much money goes to that fund. So we kind of keep that broken out within.
Okay.
But then within like the water fund, the sewer fund, and the CIT fund, I also have contingency amounts built into all those where I could see potential problems just in case I have money readily available that I can address those without always having to come back with small changes.
Okay. Then in your letter, you told us what the range was and told us who won, but what was the winning bid?
It was the $418, $799, and 75 cents from JDR.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding Marathon Solar Panel Field.
Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
Mayor, are we going to do you want to have a discussion about this now, or should we talk about this later? And I'm fine either way.
It's up to you guys.
Rob, are you up to speed? Do you want to talk about this now or later? Sure. I guess, does all of council understand what we're talking about here and what's coming on with this, what the Marathon's offering to us? Rob, would you like?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
well, the letter had a pretty pretty good explanation, but a little history on this. In 2012, Marathon had an R&D project for renewable energy, and they brought this opportunity. And so we gave them approximately 6 acres to put this solar field in. They were able to do their R&D project. We benefited from the energy from this, approximately about $60,000 a year. That was actually helping provide energy to the water pollution control plant. It's been there since 2012. They're done with their research. It's still viable. The life expectancy's north of 30 years. Worked with them. They're willing to hand it over. They are getting all the equipment up to 100% functionality. There's one inverter that needs to be repaired, and that's actually in process right now. If you look at that energy savings year over year that we've experienced and will continue to experience, the operation and maintenance for mowing and things like that, and the preventative maintenance on the equipment, we will have a net benefit year over year. So,
Rob, I guess, and I appreciate that. You
Sure.
answered, I guess, one of my questions. You're confident with these panels having a 30-year life?
well,
Previously, I had not heard any solar panels having a 30-year life to them, especially ones that were made back in 2011.
you look up the research on life expectancies of commercial solar panels and things like that.
Okay.
And they're 100% functioning, you're getting somewhere between 25 and 30 years if they're properly maintained.
And they don't degrade over time? As in, so you get a kilowatt today, and 3 years from now, you're getting a half a kilowatt?
I'm sure there is some degeneration over time, but we actually have seen continued or sustainable kilowatts year over year over the first 10 years.
Okay.
So,
And your feeling is then that we're at the end of this life cycle. So we're what, 12, 8, we're not quite halfway through the life of these things. Is that
we're
correct?
about a third.
And, okay. And you're confident that our maintenance on these, do we know what Marathon's maintenance has been over the last decade?
Yes, I do.
And what was that
It was
number?
about approximately, for preventative maintenance, it was about 21, they budgeted about 21,000 a year
21 grand a year.
Yeah.
And we were thinking that we were making about 60
on the energy
in
savings.
savings, right?
Correct.
So we're down to 40,
Yes.
give or take.
Yeah.
And, okay, and you're confident then that we're going to have that same type of maintenance number going forward?
Well, we actually have Siemens, who is the vendor that actually is providing the preventative maintenance out of Bell Fountain.
Okay.
There's quite a few other options, but for continuity and sustainability for them to continue to provide that maintenance, we don't anticipate any major changes. And again, they are bringing it up to 100% functionality. So they're fine-tooth combing this whole farm to make sure everything's functioning at 100%. If whatever, yeah.
No, I understand, and that's good. I appreciate that additional information. I'm concerned, and, we look a gift horse in the mouth, right? They're going to give us this asset, and sometimes I get concerned about what we're given because of the maintenance costs going forward. So that was the reason for my questions.
Mr. Russell?
Rob, you answered one of the questions with Siemens being the potential maintenance vendor. Are we looking at a multi-year? Is that a fixed income or a fixed expense long-term agreement with them, or any idea how that contract would work?
It'd just be a year-over-year preventative maintenance contract.
And are we looking to enter into that agreement here when we assume responsibility?
Yes.
So we'll see that. So and then there's no plans to have, for example, Public Works have somebody get trained in this technology to do maintenance in-house.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Mayor?
One thing I would add, just as kind of an FYI, as we work through this process, we have had a couple of other vendors from across the country reach out to us interested in partnering with the city in a kind of a similar fashion that Marathon did, looking at microgrids, looking at kind of different projects. So there may be opportunities for us to leverage this in other ways, but that obviously, I wanted to give you that as an FYI that we would put that out there, but obviously we can't do anything like that until we assume ownership of it.
Any other questions or comments? Letter to be filed.
Letter from Grant Administrator of the Hancock Regional Planning Commission, Lizzie Essinger, regarding update on the Ohio Department of Development's brownfield remediation and demolition grant programs.
Questions or comments? Letter to be filed. We have no committee reports. Legislation, we will start with resolution. We have one.
First reading for Resolution 10, 2022, a resolution approving the expenditures made by the Auditor's Office on the attached list of vouchers which either exceed the purchase order or were incurred without a purchase order, exceeding the statutory limit of $3,000, all in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 5705.41D.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of Resolution 10-2022.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Aye. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki? Aye. Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Ordinances.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-11. An ordinance amending section 22 of codified ordinance number 2021-116, known as the salary ordinance of the city of Findlay, Ohio, and repealing all other ordinances and/or parts of ordinances in conflict herewith of the city of Findlay, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
So, Don, we had your letter that said that needed to be amended. Is the assumption that really what we're talking about is 2022-011 as amended per the letter? Because I usually we say that in our.
I would think we have to amend it, Grant.
I would agree.
So we need a motion to amend per the letter.
Mr. Russell.
So I would move that ordinance 2022-011 be amended with the dates adjusted per Don's letter in our packet.
Second, Mr. Ballman. All those in favor of the amendment as described, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer. Aye. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Weisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The amendment is adopted.
No, it's
Oh,
amended.
I'm sorry.
Don't we have to make a motion to adopt then?
Oh, yeah. No, the amendment is adopted. The ordinance is not. Mr. Russell.
Move to adopt ordinance 2022-011 as amended.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the amendment, or I'm sorry, the motion as amended, say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Weisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-14. An ordinance vacating a certain portion of a certain alley hereinafter referred to as the Cypress Avenue vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio.
Mr. Slough.
I'd move for adoption of ordinance 2022-014.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Discussion. Here, Mr. Wobser.
Mr. President, I guess, wouldn't we not normally have a public hearing on something like this prior to the third reading?
If we have all the budding property owner signatures on a vacation, we do not.
Thank you very much.
That everybody understood that answer? Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye. If your name is called, those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Weisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-15. An ordinance to approve certain replacement pages to the Findlay codified ordinances and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-17. An ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for various projects, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Question for you, Jeremy. Kind of pertaining to this specifically, but also in general, what kind of price pressure are we seeing on just in everything that you're bidding out? Capital, equipment? And,
Going up fast.
I mean, and I take it asphalt is through the roof?
Asphalt, and from a Friday to Monday, when our TAC went up 40%. We're looking at seeing prices last year, we were in the $152 a cubic yard of asphalt, and I'm guessing this year we're gonna be seeing 165 or higher. Just as gas prices go up, all that's going up at the same time. So like our Bright Road one, we got that out early, and we were able to obtain good pricing before the gas prices up. Our other resurfacing, we were still one of the first ones out, so we're going to be seeing some of the best pricing on that, but it's still, it's going to have a reflection on that. And we're kind of having the same problem, I'm sure, as everyone else, can tell with that, especially with vehicles, equipment, all that kind of stuff. No one's holding pricing anymore, that it's going to keep going up.
So with something like street maintenance, do you consider, obviously we won't probably doing a lot of add-ons. Do we ever consider pulling back just because the environment isn't good?
Where we're setting, we have enough add-ons if the pricing does come back all right, that we can throw them in there and still kind of function. But what I have in the base bid right now is pretty much so that way we stay on track and we're never getting behind ourselves. I think what we have sitting wise, we're going to be all right now, but I may not be able to add on additional streets with it. But that's kind of one of the good things working with the Public Works Department, Street Department, stuff like that. We try to team up and get a lot of things done, all on one street. They can do stuff a lot cheaper and faster than what I can do on the contractor side, and vice versa. So if we work together, saying putting curb down for them, I can put down curb a lot faster. It may not be the cheapest, but I can do a lot faster. But there's other things they can do that are a lot cheaper in the long run for the city. So we've been working together for the past couple of years, and it seems to be stretching our dollar a little bit farther every year.
So one of your predecessors, I believe John Seaman used to, I believe his love was concrete, if I recall correctly. Anyway, at any point in time, does concrete on streets become a viable option?
Maybe at some point it could. Our biggest problem is, having concrete on streets, is trying to get it down in a timely fashion. They do have, it's called roller compacted concrete. You pretty much put it down like a paver and you take a roller and roll over top. But kind of the bad thing with that is no one really around here does that. So we're going to be pulling people from Columbus area that do it, but in the long run, is that going to be cheaper bringing someone from Columbus, because now we're going to be paying mobilization charge. So it's something we could look at.
Say no.
It's an easy way to say it, but it is something like, say water lines. Is plastic pipe going to be more expensive than ductile iron pipe? So that's stuff we look at before we go out to bid. What's going to give us our best price?
So then with this specific ordinance, this week, or passing it right now versus passing it in 2 weeks, you have a concern that if we're not out there bidding, we're going to see price pressure on
a lot of this stuff is going to be equipment and vehicles and that kind of stuff. I understand, there's state contracts with that. So, but, a lot of times that they're not going to hold their pricing on that. They could be asking for rebids or something like that. But with our projects, I think I have some money in there for street resurfacing. One of the benefits for that is getting stuff out early. I've already had contractors call and they ask, how soon can you get me started? And I'll tell them I'm getting money right now. If you want to start April 1st, I will get you started April 1st. And then that gives us advantage because they said, you'll be our first job. We'll get in 2 months, we'll whip the whole job out and you won't even know we're there. So that's kind of another advantage with that is I have the I have the money readily available. I can write those contracts and I can get them rolling.
Great. Thank you.
Ms. Mayor.
I was just going to add, obviously we all keep talking about supply chain, and you'll hear it probably a couple more times tonight, especially on the equipment. As Jeremy mentioned, we're seeing even in the police department ordering boots, that they said that the boots may not be here until October for some of the new cadets. So, obviously we're looking at that on everything. So the sooner we can order some of these things, the better, so that we know that we're going to be getting them.
Mr. Wobser.
I think at the same time, to add what Councilman Russell and the mayor had said, asphalt's directly related to the crude oil price, which we know has shot up over the last 2 weeks. But at the same time, that price could come down just as quickly, depending on what happens in the world markets. So we need to watch extending ourselves and buying too far forward in advance, because we could end up with a much better price towards the end of the season.
Just a quick comment that spot oil went below $100 for the first time in quite a while today. So, of course, that made the markets go wild. Mr. Russell.
So for the reasons stated just in this conversation, I think it's in our best interest to get 2022-017 passed tonight. Therefore, I make a motion to suspend council's rules and give 2022-017 its third reading.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspension of the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Baumann?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno? Oh, he's not here. Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-17.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance 2022-017 say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Baumann?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
And Mr. Slough?
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-18, an ordinance authorizing the mayor and/or director of public service safety of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into an agreement with the Findlay YMCA to operate the Riverside Swimming Pool facility and associated YMCA programs for public and recreational use for the city of Findlay for the 2022-2024 seasons and declaring an emergency. First reading for ordinance 2022-19, an ordinance authorizing the service safety director and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for construction, appropriating and transferring funds, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Unfortunately, Randy, who is the chair of the Water and Sewer Committee, is not here tonight, and I know that before I want to consider this, even given the fiscal climate or the inflationary climate we're in, I'd like to get an update where we are on our meter replacement project. Josh, I don't know, as the other member of Water and Sewer, where you are on that, but it would be nice if we could get an update on our number of transmitters installed, what our projections are going forward. And Rob, you can give it to me orally, but I'd like to see it in writing, too.
Sure.
As in anticipation of an April 5th meeting. But if you have a update you
Sure. Yeah.
want to give, that'd be great.
So,
Thanks.
supply chain, as the mayor pointed out, has been the nemesis of this situation, to put a full court press on the installation of these meters. We're hoping to get another 2,000 meters by the end of April, and they were ordered fourth quarter of 2021. So that's the lead time that we're dealing with. We also have some coming in July as well, but it's based on availability to get it to us. We're pressuring them heavily. So we are about, we're about done with the commercial side. We had about 500 to do last week, and they should be done. I did not get an update this morning yet, but I anticipated that to be done. And then we were going to start on cycle 1 at residential on the north side and full court press and work our way south. But it's based on how many meters we have. So,
Is it meter, are you using the term meter and the transmitter
yes,
interchangeably?
sorry, yes. Thank you for that yeah. So it's not for lack of manpower or effort, it's supply chain. So, and I will get that written up and sent to you all.
Let's see. First reading for ordinance 2022-20, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio to apply for additional grant funds from the Federal Aviation Administration and the Ohio Department of Transportation Aviation for additional construction funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
This is authorizing us to enter into agreements to share costs. This is something we have traditionally taken care of in one sitting, and for that reason, I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-020 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. All those in favor of suspension of the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
And Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give ordinance 2022-020 its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-20, ordinance 2022-20.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-20.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
And Mr. Weisner?
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-21, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Russell.
Jeremy had sent out a status on this, and he requested it be done by April 5th, but given the conversations today, I'm wondering if this is something that, once again, it's in our best interest to take care of tonight, and it's kind of an open-ended question if somebody would be in a, I'm kind of wondering what the feeling of council is on that. So it's a question if we think we should be suspending and getting this moving.
Jeremy?
I can give a quick comment just on this project. This project has already been bid out, so really this is appropriating money to write contracts out. You know, on the city side, I guess, if you want to say, we won't see any additional cost savings, but what's going to be help is, you know, be a kind of friendly neighbor with the contractor, get that purchase order out to them or that contract out to them so they can secure material, so that way they're not taking any hits. Unnecessary hits that they don't have to because of pricing changing on pipe or something like that. So getting this money tonight, I'll be able to get those contracts out this week. They'll be able to get started sooner. But, you know, saying I would really need it tonight, I don't have to. I can wait. But, you know, if I can get started sooner, that'd be, you know, beneficial for everyone.
So to that point, we've been first to market for numerous years now, and I think I would assume our relationship with our vendors has improved. Do we see that? Do we see improved pricing with them because they know we are ready to go? And does this build that goodwill
Yes.
to that vendor market?
Yeah. I can go into it if you want me to, but I'll give you a yes or no.
Mr. Wobser.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate where you're coming from on that. I guess my concern is it's a significant amount of money and not allowing it for the public perusal for at least the next, 2 weeks till the next meeting. I'd be concerned about that, but point well taken, Councilman Russell, on where you're going and the conversation that we've had with Jeremy previously.
Mr. Russell.
And I think that because this is a team effort, both our vendors and us, and this has been in the capital plan. The majority of this is OPWC money, and if we can help that business that is providing service to us, help them hedge against the inflationary pressures they're seeing. I think that's being responsive. It's being responsive to the vendors who are a big partner in our success. And for that reason, I would move that council statutory rules be suspended and ordinance 2022-021 be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Niemeyer. All those in favor of suspension of the rules on ordinance 2022-021, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-21, ordinance 2022-21.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve 2022-21.
Second, Ms. Warnicki. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the ordinance, say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell? Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
And Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-22, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio, to sign the necessary paperwork to transfer ownership of Marathon Petroleum Company LP's solar panel field that was built on the City of Findlay's Water Pollution Control Center's campus.
Unfinished business. We'll start with old business. New business. Mr. Wobser.
I'd like to call a strategic planning committee meeting for April 5th prior to the next council meeting at 6:00 p.m. in council chambers. Agenda to be set later.
Ms. Mayor.
Just a couple of quick items. One, I wanted to note that a representative from Marathon was planning to be here this evening, and their schedule changed, so they will plan to have them present at one of the future readings for any additional questions. I want to give a shout out to our fire department especially, but to police and public works and engineering that all worked. I know we've had a number of fires over the last couple of weeks, and they have responded in the manner that we expect, but certainly that makes us very proud, working in cold conditions and all sorts of conditions. I would just remind folks that if you haven't already, if you're on social media sharing the reminders around, luckily we're turning the weather, so hopefully folks aren't having to use space heaters quite as much, but making sure that you are using space heaters safely, keeping those away from items, because those have been a cause of a number of fires within the region recently. I just wanted to touch on briefly that the city of Findlay has not made any financial commitment to the county regarding the Bearcat, and prior to any such commitment, we'll obviously be coming back to you all. More to follow on that in the future. I think that's it. Any questions for me?
Mr. Wobser.
No questions for the mayor. I had one other topic.
Actually, I just remembered one other thing.
Go right ahead.
Things are working out very well with CCNO and a number of our other jail contracts. So we're continuing to kind of increase those as we figure out logistics and flow. CCNO has been a great partner. They were here this morning picking up a number of folks. I just thought I would share. We only have about it's either 6 or 7 inmates there currently, but that is actually a couple of folks were taken up there last week, served their time, were able to get released, and are now done serving their time. So, some of these folks are there for just a couple of days, and we're working through the warrants, and I know our team here locally for Findlay PD really appreciates your support in making sure that our justice system is working appropriately, and we'll continue to do our part to make sure that happens. Thank you.
Quick question. CCNO is actually coming here and picking up our meds and taking them.
Yes. So currently CCNO is coming down once a week. Again, $80 a day per inmate inmate, that includes their transportation costs. They have also, because it's been working so well, they've offered to come down more often. So we're working through kind of the logistics on our side to make that happen. Last week, they even came, picked people up, and then we called them a couple hours later, or we ended up taking somebody up there, and they were like, why didn't you call? We would have come back down. So they've been great to work with.
For folks who don't know, can you say what CC&L?
You know, I keep forgetting it. Community Corrections Center of Northern Ohio.
Located
In Stryker, up in Williams County. So it's a good distance. Yeah, it's a multi-county. They also house for the U.S. Marshals. It's kind of like a federal prison facility. So I know a couple of the folks were not so excited to be going there. And I think there'll be some scared straight a little bit. It's a little bit of a different operation compared to the Hancock County Justice Center. So I think it's working out well, though.
Any other new business? Mr. Wobser.
I had one thing I wanted to bring up to council for your consideration over a period of time here for later conversation. I was approached by a couple of different owners of food trucks, and council may not know, I did not know prior to these conversations, that food trucks are not actually allowed in our business district on Main Street. There's an ordinance against that, and I shouldn't say against that. It doesn't allow for them to be there. And I just think it would be worthwhile at least to have a conversation about how that may or may not be allowed in the future as a addition to our DORA situation, and as we continue to add new things to our downtown business district. Now, in the conversation I had with Councilman Russell and Councilman Greeno, points were brought up about our current existing land-based restaurants may have a concern with this, and point well taken. So these are things that we need to be cognizant of and aware of, but I still think that there would be a way for us to find a reasonable, happy medium that would still allow for those vendors to provide in our downtown business district. And as we go forward with that, I'll get some information out for our consideration.
Ms. Warnicki?
Just ask a quick question on that. Where would they go?
In a parking spot on Main Street.
Okay.
Other new business? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, Mr. Weisner. All in favor say aye. Any opposed, nay. We are adjourned.